Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Create With Us podcast. This is episode 10. We've reached the double digits. Welcome back to the podcast where we take you behind the screens. My name is Brett Barley, joined as always by my dude here, Jeff Vinn. Jeff, happy Friday to you, my guy.
Yeah, Brett, can you believe it has been 10 episodes already since starting out just about a month ago? So we've been on it.
Yeah, man, we've been banging them out. And today we have a great guest. His name is Paul May from Grand Technology Solutions. Before we bring him in, let me tell you a little bit about Paul. Paul May and his wife, Catherine, founded Grand Technology Solutions in 2016. They offer customer support and technology improvement consulting for small business and residential clients. Prior to launching Grand Technology Solutions, Paul worked for more than 20 years in the IT field. So let's bring him on in to find out a little bit more about Grand Technology Solutions and a little bit more about Paul himself. Paul, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for coming on. So let's hop right into it. Let's learn a little bit about Grand Technology Solutions. Paul, why don't you take it away from here? Tell us a little bit about what you do. Tell us a little bit about your hustle, how long you've been doing it, where you're from, a little bit of background.
Sure thing. So we are a managed IT service provider, and we do things a little bit differently. Your typical service provider, we do all the things that a typical service provider does, like, data management and computer upgrades and routers and switches and Wi-Fi's and email and all of that kind of thing. But where we really excel is in working with people. We tend to be in kind of the 1 to 25 employee space. We do a lot of consulting, training, and I would say probably the biggest thing is change management, especially when it comes to things like Office 365 implementations, email migrations, things like that. So when I first came out of college 30 years ago, I started out as a teacher, and I taught in Baltimore City for 5 years, and I never felt more worthwhile about what I was doing, but I had 3 kids at the time and just couldn't afford it anymore. And so I got into the IT world. My first job was with a contract with the National Institutes of Health in Maryland. And I kind of quickly went up the ranks into managing a team of support techs. And then I moved into technical training. I kind of morphed the teaching and the technical world together and did that as an independent contractor for a number of years. And then my youngest daughter, graduated college in 3 years instead of 4. We call her our little underachiever. And at that point, we decided, I'd always been doing stuff on the side, and we decided that we were going to go for it and start the business. And now we're 5 years in and have more than 200 small business clients in the Northeast Florida and throughout the country.
Excellent. That's exactly what I was going to ask. How many clients you'd say you have, and if most are local. So when you say across the country, like give us who's the furthest away. Give us an example of where all you guys cover.
I'm glad you asked, because I would say 80% of our clients are here in Northeast Florida. So St. Augustine, Jacksonville, going all the way down to Crescent Beach and all the way up to Amelia. But we have in our client portal management system, we have a tool that can do little dots on the map. And it's really cool to bring that up now, because we've got people in Chicago, Maryland, Virginia, South Florida, West Coast. And we just recently picked up a client in Canada. So I can officially say we're an international company now.
Yeah, there you go. Very cool.
That's pretty impressive growth. So just in about 4 or 5 years, you've gone from 0 to 200. What has been some of your main techniques to get that growth and to sign 200 businesses up?
I would say the number one thing is definitely word of mouth and referrals. I am part of 3 different networking groups. One in particular, we started about 3 years ago, called SMB Turnkey Solutions at smbturnkey.com. And we are a consortium of trusted, vetted business advisors. We do nothing but B2B referrals and B2B client work. And we've gotten really close. We collaborate on projects. We actually have one client that's worked with 3 of us in some capacity. And then, of course, we do, LinkedIn and Facebook content. That same daughter that graduated in 3 years runs a content management company. She writes all of our content for LinkedIn and Facebook. We post a blog a week, and we post a bunch of social media. And then I would say the other thing is that we do quarterly business reviews with clients, trying to make sure that their needs are met and there aren't other opportunities sitting on the table for us to get additional revenue and support them at the same time.
That's pretty rad. So basically, word of mouth and these networking groups, one that you've made, got you there. And then two, Paul, we've been connecting on the socials lately, and I've been seeing your post pop up there. And now you get to share your story via this podcast too when it finishes. So that'll be pretty rad.
It's perfect.
So what type of customers do you typically work with? Is there a certain field that you usually help out, or does it kind of vary?
That's a good question. I would never have done it on purpose. We tend to work with lawyers quite a bit, and CPAs. We've got a handful of CPAs, I think, because we do a lot of stuff like encryption, providing a portal for sending sensitive data, making sure things are really locked down. Other than that, it's mostly service. We don't do a lot of retail. We have a company, River City Claims, for example, that's an insurance adjuster. We've got a company up in Massachusetts that's a strategic business coaching company, things like that. We don't really focus on any vertical or industry. It's mostly just what falls into our laps. I think if we were going to focus on a vertical, it would probably be in the CPA, financial, legal world.
Gotcha. Very cool. Well, let's talk a little bit specifically, if you will. Let's get technical with it. You like
Sure.
that? Let's talk about how you help businesses grow. Jeff, you wanna take it over from here and find out a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So you were mentioning, Paul, you serve those customers, maybe with one seat up to like 25 seats. Especially in COVID times, where a lot of people used to have the benefit of the office and the secure network there, and perhaps the computer staying there. Things have changed a lot. So what's one of the main challenges that you see clients facing that you help them overcome?
So I have talked with several other colleagues about this recently, that I don't want to say I feel guilty. I feel very blessed that COVID has actually increased our revenue, because there is such a demand. And I will say we are helping in that demand. But also, one of the things that was really cool when the pandemic came out, that almost every single one of our clients was already in position to have their employees work remotely, to manage their business from any device anywhere in the world as a result of being on these platforms. So I would say the number one thing is that we really try to help business owners focus on their business instead of focusing on the technology. A lot of people will say, all right, we've got a business, let's get rocking and rolling. We're going to go to Best Buy. We're going to go buy 4 computers and 2 printers and a copy of QuickBooks, and we're going to rock and roll. And then they start working with it all and realize that there's a lot of things that they're struggling with. Or I think one of the biggest things I see is that people already have Office 365 licenses, but they're not implementing what they could with those tools. A story I've told in networking groups is that when my wife and I bought our very first house, I built a deck on the back of the house, and I was very proud of it, did a good job. But the next house we bought, I paid somebody to do it, because I don't have time. I need to focus on what we do as a living. So I try to get my business owners into that mentality that stop trying to do it yourself. Just pay and have a trusted service that can get that done for you, so that you can focus on growing your business.
For sure. And take us, you said, like you help lawyers, for examples, or CPA. Say a lawyer's starting out, or they're growing a little bit, and maybe there's 2 of them and a secretary. What's the typical stack of services that you give them? You mentioned like Office 365, but walk us through like what a startup or small business owner would need to have like a holistic setup.
Sure. So one scenario that's pretty common in our world is that a business will already be in place, and they'll have like Grand Technology Solutions at gmail.com. And there's a couple of issues with that. One is that it's not the greatest for their business reputation to be using a free email. And the second is that it's not as secure as other platforms can be. And then the third is there's very little that they can do in the way of team collaboration and shared calendars, shared files and folders, securely accessible from anywhere. So if it was a brand new startup, we would help advise them on the equipment to get. The $10,000 server closet is a thing of the past. For about $200 a year per user, they can purchase a full Microsoft Business Office license, which gives them access to create a SharePoint collaboration library, OneDrive online resources for their individual users, which in both of those cases, they can set up file sharing both internally and externally. So if companies are paying for Dropbox, I have a lot of people that have Office 365 licenses and they're paying for Dropbox, and they don't realize that they can do the same functionality with Dropbox that they can in SharePoint using the licenses that they're already paying for. So if they're a brand new startup, we would set them up with a domain for their business name, like grandtechnologysolutions.com or whatever the name of their business, and then create individual email accounts tied to that domain. So I would be paul@grandtechnologysolutions.com versus a private or a public email address. Then we would set them up with SharePoint or OneDrive. Typically in SharePoint, it's a secure resource. We can synchronize it with the computer. One of the big arguments against, if you Google Office 365 versus G Suite, you're going to see arguments on both sides. But I've got one.
And G Suite is the G Suite is the Google Suite, right?
Right, the Google Suite. One of the strongest arguments is that G Suite's difficult to set up with local synchronization of files. So let's say you're sitting in an airport lobby waiting to get on a plane, and you're working on a document. You have to shut that down and get on the plane, and you can't touch it until you get to your destination, unless of course you pay for Wi-Fi nowadays, but that argument's getting old. But with Office 365, both SharePoint and OneDrive, that data is always local. When you open a file and edit and save it, and then the second you make a change, that data is synchronized with SharePoint or OneDrive so that it's accessible from any device anywhere. So you get on that plane, you keep typing away. The second you get connected to Wi-Fi again, it's going to sync up and be accessible from your phone, tablet, somebody else's computer. You're out of town, hotel, business center, whatever. So then we talk security. We typically, if they don't have a hardware level firewall, we'll recommend putting a firewall in place. We'll get them set up with a Wi-Fi access point.
What's a firewall for our users who are listening?
A good question. So any internet service provider, Comcast, AT&T, Verizon, whatever, is going to provide a modem. And typically small businesses, they don't want to spend any more money, so they just pay for Comcast or whatever, and they come out and they install that modem. And that modem, while it does provide some level of security in today's business worlds, especially businesses that are in, like a strip mall or an area, a business park where there's a lot of other business, they're susceptible to attacks from the internet, from people tapping into their Wi-Fi in parking lots, things like that. So what a firewall does, it goes between the internet service and the rest of your network, and it blocks all incoming traffic unless you have requested that traffic. So that's a layer of security that we install and we manage, and we're able to monitor for alerts. And then the other big bread and butter of what we do is called remote monitoring and management. So we'll install an agent on each machine and have the ability to monitor for alerts like processors running too high, running out of disk space, or virus attack, or some kind of intrusion attempt, things like that. And then we standardize on antivirus. So we use a combination of WebRoot and Bitdefender, which are the industry standards for small business. And we're able to centrally monitor all that as well. And then we sit down with the client and we talk about, all right, so what business processes do you have in place? Who's doing what? Who needs access to what data? We'll typically set up in SharePoint a SharePoint library just for the C-suite folks, the business owners, that might contain stuff like HR files and employee and payroll stuff. And then we'll set up another SharePoint site for the team as a whole. And in the end, they can go out on site, sit down with a client, and instead of saying, all right, when I get back to the office, I'll send you that file, they're able to go right into their phone, pull up in the OneDrive app, which is automatically synced with all their stuff, and email the file. So they have that ability to work from anywhere, from any device securely.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. A couple of things to note here. You mentioned in the beginning, like business owners, they get out, they sign up with G Suite, get a Gmail account, unprofessional things like that. Not only are there some common steps which people know, like buy a domain name, but that whole firewall thing, right? If you're just using like an Xfinity modem out of the box or things like that. So
Yeah.
kind of makes sense right now, all the layers that need to be set up. And it sounds pretty affordable actually per user, like for what you get and ongoing support you get, right? That's a lot easier than figuring it out backwards, I would guess.
Yeah, so our basic model is between $75 and $100 per computer per month. And when you got a small business with a handful of employees, that number can be a little bit daunting, but then they're comfortable spending money on insurance and comfortable spending money on their internet service provider, et cetera. And another story I tell is that my wife and I were looking at a lawn service for fertilization. It was like $40 a month. And I was like, I don't want to spend that. It's too much money. And then later that evening, we went out and dropped $75 on sushi and didn't even blink an eye. So it's kind of that mentality that, are you going to take it seriously, or are you going to just kind of hodgepodge your way through it? Because by spending that money and getting that security stack in place, getting the remote monitoring, and most importantly, just having that lifeline to pick up a phone and call and get really good support is going to make all the difference in the world.
For sure. Technology is one of those things, like say turning on the water, our health, we take it for granted and we don't recognize what it does for us until it breaks, right? So yeah. It's nice that you have all that laid out and covered. Last question on this part. What typical like laptop setup do you recommend? Do you have a certain brand you go with, or where's it out there these days?
So we are a Dell preferred partner. I get a little bit of a cut on the price that I try to pass on to clients. It's more having the availability and warranty that I like with that partnership. I've always been a Dell guy. I used to be a Dell certified repair technician, and then I got the certification just so I could have easier access to hardware resources when I was working with the NIH. So we are a Dell house, true and true. We tend to support HP. There are people that prefer to use HP. Lately, the last computer I bought for one of my techs was a Lenovo. They're, the original ThinkPad. They're really making a big push into the small business world, a little bit more affordable than others. I would say as far as specs, and this is something that I fight with clients with all the time, is that they're in this mentality that this computer is only 6 years old. I should get more out of it. And I would say that the lifetime for a computer, using it in a business world, should be about 4 years old. Plan for a disposable product. Don't plan to recommission it or repurpose it to another client. And then I would say out of the gate, plan to spend between $900 and $1,000 on a laptop. Plan to spend maybe 6 or 7 for a desktop. You want a minimum i5 latest generation or newer i7 processor and 16 gigs of RAM. Disk space is not as much of an issue nowadays because we're doing so much in the cloud, but you definitely want to go after an SSD drive, a solid state drive. They're electronic as opposed to mechanical, and they're much faster. So typically I'll recommend a 256 gig SSD drive.
Gotcha. So about $1,000 on a laptop before your life expectancy. Well, pretty cool stuff. Well, we covered how you help businesses, the service you offer, and pretty much you take away that time and headache, and then once again, proactively address their technology. So hopefully they're not calling in a pickle and in panic because it's working. So Brett, what do we have for the last part of the show?
Yeah, Paul, let's talk a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey. So you mentioned a little bit earlier that you used to be a teacher. So I wanted to ask, now that you work for yourself, tell us the main difference between working for the man and working for yourself, man.
I love it. I had a conversation similar with a colleague recently that, I don't want to jinx myself, but I love what I'm doing. And I'm in the mindset right now that I don't ever want to go back to working for anybody except myself. And I want to make it clear that my wife and I own the company together. She has another job as well, but she does all of our invoicing, accounting. And it's funny because we are polar opposites in just about everything. We would never have been connected in Match.com. And we duke it out on a regular basis on how we approach things for the business. She tends to be very analytical, making sure the I's are dotted and all that. And I tend to be like, let's get in the go-kart and run. But in order to have a successful business, you need both of those mindsets. And we've learned how to communicate with each other and draw from each other's strengths to really build a strong company. I would say, as far as being an entrepreneur, the biggest struggle is finding that balance between growing the business and running the business. We're starting to hire staff. We've got the need to delegate. And when I first started the business, I get testimonials. Paul was great at this. Paul did a good job with that. If you need help, call Paul. And we're trying to get out of that Paul mode and into the Grand Technology Solutions mode, and making sure that we're hiring people that have that same, we're going to help people because they need to be helped and we're good at it. One of my goals is actually part of my mission statement is to eliminate the stigma of that condescending IT guy that's going to look out down his nose at you like you're a mere mortal and walk away. The other thing I say in networking groups is there's an old IT joke that we've done some troubleshooting and we've narrowed down the problem and determined that it's between the front of your monitor and the back of your chair. And, that's a funny joke. And in some cases it's true, but that's really where we focus is, I'll walk into a client's office sometime and they'll be tapping away at something else and say, all right, my passwords are there and the computer's there and let me know if you need me. And I'm like, okay, come on over and sit next to me because I'm going to show them more than I'm going to fix. And that's really where we focus. And I know that is a big time differentiator for our company. Every company says they're great at customer service, but for us, it's really what it's all about.
Yeah, those relationships. I wanted to go back to the working with your significant other, your wife. Do you guys have to set boundaries? Because you could be at a dinner on Saturday night or hanging out on Sunday, and all of a sudden someone crashes in with a work issue where the other person doesn't even want to think about it. So have you had to kind of pull off your thinking and the way you run your relationship?
It's a good question. We do really well. We sometimes go out to dinner and talk about business stuff and sit down and iron things out. I think you probably know as a small business owner, there is no downtime, especially in the IT world. We're plugged in 24/7. But before the pandemic, we were able to go out on a cruise. I had an employee covering and we were able to disconnect. But when you're offering 24/7, 365 support, it's a little bit difficult to unplug. But as we grow and add more people and delegate and earn trust, I think that capability is even better. I think for my wife and me, it's just been communication, learning how to communicate with each other and identifying, which we've done our whole relationship over 30 years, is that there is value in the diversity between us.
Nice. That's pretty cool. Sounds like you got it worked out. And I love your vision of getting people to actually do the work and service the customers, right? Because as you grow, you're going to hit a max capacity or a point where it's too stressful and either service slacks off or your life just becomes miserable or both. So cool vision there. It's not called Paul. It's called Grand Technology Solutions.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, let's get into, Paul, this is one of our favorite segments. We call it the rapid fire round because we don't want to give you any time to think about it. We just want to get some off the cuff answers. So you ready for it, Paul?
Okay.
Let's get into it. Let's find out a little bit more about you. Tell us your favorite hobby. How do you stay energized outside of work when you're not behind the computer, not doing Grand Technology Solutions? What's a favorite hobby of yours?
My wife and I are pretty avid golfers.
All right.
I used to play on my own quite a bit, but she started jumping in with me in the last couple of years. and loves it as much as I do. And she beat me last week. And I would say that we would take up bowling, but she beats me at that too. So we'll just keep playing.
Your wife, she's super analytical, super competitive, and beats you.
So. There you go. There you go. Well, you live in a great town for some golf. That is for sure. Yeah. What is the one piece of advice that you would give your younger self right now?
I would say to recognize challenges as opportunities to learn, so that if you're, I tell people coming into the IT world, I've mentored a lot of people, that when it works, it's really, really cool. And when it doesn't work, it's really, really not cool. And that, a lot of times when you've got a customer's lifeblood on the line and they're losing money, it's really not cool. So anytime we've been faced with a challenge, we always overcome the challenge, knock on wood, but then we document it. We learn from it. When we get the scent of that challenge coming in the future, we pull up that documentation and say, all right, this is how we dealt with this in the past. Mm-hmm. This is how we're going to get through this. And so instead of the panic of, oh my God, what am I going to do about this? It's more, I really try to take a second and think, is there an opportunity to learn more and document from this?
There you go. Apply what you learn next time around. Good stuff. Paul, what is a book that you highly recommend? Do you have a favorite book? And it doesn't necessarily have to be, on the technical subject, just in general. You got any books that you would recommend for anybody watching?
I'll give you one personal and one business. So the business book would be Traction. Gino somebody, I can't remember what it is, but the and the Entrepreneurial Operating System Strategy is built around that Traction book. Just a really wonderful business book. From a personal perspective, my wife and I are part of a book club. I've been an avid reader my whole life. I would say My Side of the Mountain by Gene Craighead George, about a kid that runs away and lives in a burned out tree in the Catskill Mountains. Whoa. That's what I want to do.
Oh, very cool.
That sounds super interesting. I'm going to have to check that out. Okay. One thing you're deeply grateful for right now. First thing that comes to mind.
Well, what I said before, that I almost feel guilty that we're doing so well as a result of the demand right now. I'm very grateful that we have the opportunity to build business, but even more so to be in a position to help people, because that's what we really enjoy doing.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, let's go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you so much for joining us today, Paul. Before we let you go, why don't you tell everyone the best way? There's going to be links and stuff in the bio, but anybody watching, best way to engage with you, best way to connect with you, let them know.
Terrific. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, guys. Best way is just go to helpgts.com, short for Grand Technology Solutions. At the end of networking groups, I always say, for IT success, type help GTS. And also we're all over LinkedIn and Facebook. If you just search for grandtechnologysolutions.com. And I'm also part of the SMB Turnkey Network at smbturnkey.com.
Fantastic. Everybody go check it out for any IT help you may need in the future down the road. Hit up our man, Paul. Paul, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a blast. We wish you the best moving forward, and everybody watching at home, enjoy your weekend. Thank you for joining us for episode 10. We will see you next week on the Create With Us podcast.
All right. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thank you.